Just into CNN, very sad news. Actor Matthew Perry has died at the age of 54. The Friends star was found dead in a hot tub at his Los Angeles home.
I was sitting on the set the day that Matthew Perry died. You're starting to immediately tick through all the possibilities of a guy of that age. What could have led to sudden death? Could it be a heart attack? Was it trauma? Did he hit his head? When people looked at the pathology report, I think there was some degree of surprise.
The LA medical examiner said that Matthew Perry died because of the acute effects of ketamine.
There were 5 people charged in connection to Matthew Perry's death, and that included a woman who is called the ketamine queen simply because she supplies large quantities of ketamine to Hollywood A-listers.
The alleged drug dealer to the stars, dubbed the ketamine queen, will face trial in March. Prosecutors say her so-called drug-selling emporium played a role in the death of actor Matthew Perry.
And people want to know, like, what is this drug?
A lot of people think of ketamine still as a recreational party drug. There's all sorts of nicknames for it on the club scene.
From my own club days, the 2 big names were just K and Special K.
Special K and Kit Kat.
K or Special K.
But ketamine's much more than that.
The Matthew Perry situation really brought ketamine into the spotlight.
And I don't think it was his intention at all. But part of his legacy will be to have taught us about something that we're learning more and more about. I think for every doctor alive, they've had some knowledge of ketamine because it's been around for a long time.
Ketamine was first synthesized in 1962.
It was actually meant to be a replacement for its cousin, PCP.
PCP, or phenylcyclidine, as it's called, was used for anesthesia. One of the things that was a concern, however, is that PCP's effects lasted beyond the necessary clinical need. Ketamine's effects are more short-lived than PCP's effects.
Ketamine was first studied in prisoners by researchers at the University of Michigan. When they wrote their first paper, they described ketamine as a dissociative anesthetic. The term is used to describe experiences people have where they feel outside themselves or disconnected from their physical being.
Say you're walking down the street in New York City. There are tall buildings. As you walk, it looks like the buildings are moving instead of you. That's a dissociative effect. So a simple way of thinking about some of ketamine's actions. Glutamate is the brain's sort of excitatory transmitter. And what ketamine does is that it blocks a certain glutamate receptor, so prevents it from sort of firing. That's how ketamine can lower your sensitivity to certain stimuli like pain.
In 1970, the FDA approved medical use of ketamine.
One of the first large-scale uses of it was the Vietnam War.
You had to be able to both take care of pain as well as to provide some sort of battlefield anesthetic in a very rapid way. And ketamine was pretty effective.
At the same time, ketamine was thought of as a horse tranquilizer.
Veterinarian clinics were largely using ketamine as their main anesthetics.
And then we were also hearing, wait a second, this thing is also being used recreationally.
There's evidence of ketamine misuse throughout the 70s.
In the 1980s, people were breaking into veterinary clinics or medical clinics and taking vials.
I think it was probably mid-late 1980s where it really came onto the club scene.
So it became its own party drug in the 90s.
Ketamine, primarily used as a veterinary anesthetic, has become a party drug.
It's a cheap high. It doesn't cost much, lasts a few minutes, and it's easier to get into places you go.
People at nightclubs just started, handing out powder, saying this is ketamine. It could enhance the lights and the music. Tons of people were using it. In 1999, the DEA scheduled ketamine.
Ketamine went on Schedule 3, meaning that it now has restrictions on how it can be prescribed, how it can be used. And any use outside of those restrictions is criminal.
When they made ketamine a Schedule 3 substance, I think it actually, in a counterintuitive way, gave it more legitimacy because it takes away its sole sort of perception as a recreational drug.
The first time I heard about ketamine's potential benefit for mental health was in the year 2000, when a very small paper out of Yale was published Then a few years later, actually in 2006, there was another study that came out that replicated this with more patients. And these two studies suggested that using this old drug could produce a highly effective improvement in depression among people who've been depressed for decades and nothing worked.
Most antidepressants were sort of in a similar drug class, but ketamine seemed to be doing something totally different in the brain. It's like taking a picture of your brain and seeing a few bright spots here and there, and then taking ketamine and seeing a bunch of roads between all those bright spots suddenly light up.
In psychiatry, most treatments take multiple weeks just to begin having benefits, but in this case, it was minutes and hours. But we still are seeing that ketamine remains approved only as an anesthetic.
All ketamine prescribed for mental health disorders is considered off-label prescribing.
Off-label just means that a doctor is prescribing like a legally available drug for a purpose that is not necessarily what it's approved for. You can get it in an injection form. You can also get tablets. You can get lozenges. And so what we've seen in the last decade or so is hundreds of clinics around the US that have sort of popped up and are offering different types of ketamine therapy. There are also lots of clinics where you can just sort of do a phone consultation and get prescribed ketamine that you can use at home.
In recent years, we have a lot of famous people touting ketamine.
Sharon Osbourne, Lamar Odom, Elon Musk.
If someone has depression issues, they should consider talking to their doctor about ketamine instead of SSRIs.
On the one hand, I'm grateful that they're being advocates. On the other hand, I do worry that it becomes too trendy and it becomes too trivialized. It's like yoga or a vitamin. You should do your ketamine. Many of these clinics are not run by psychiatrists. They're run by people who don't have specialized training in mental illness.
The industry is not really regulated, and it kind of allows this Wild West to fester. You will inevitably get bad actors who then stigmatize an entire industry and an entire drug.
I'd read Matthew Perry's book. He was very open about taking ketamine for treatment of depression.
Ketamine felt like a giant exhale. It'd bring me into a room, sit me down, put headphones on me so I could listen to music, blindfold me, and put an IV in.
On the day, sadly, of his death, his levels corresponded with a level that could not have been attributed to a clinical administering a week and a half earlier. This was ketamine that had been taken far more recently.
Matthew Perry had a long history of struggling with addiction. In the spectrum of addictable drugs, let's say, ketamine is quite low.
It's not classically addicting, meaning you're not going to go through a severe withdrawal. But if somebody's using ketamine all the time, they're so used to the ketamine's effects that they just never want them to go away. It's like more of a psychological addiction.
Like with any drug, there are potential negative consequences. People have described having severe kidney problems.
Issues with your bladder, you can even be hissing blood, but it's pretty uncommon to just see a straight up fatal ketamine overdose. In October of 2023, Matthew Perry drowned in a hot tub. The medical examiner's report said that he died from the acute effects of ketamine.
The thing that struck me about Matthew Perry's death is that ketamine was blamed as the primary reason. And then they say contributing causes was like he drowned. Wouldn't that be like the most immediate cause of his death?
I mean, the cause of death for everybody ultimately is that your heart stops, whether that's because you got in a car accident, a drug overdose, a heart attack, whatever it might be. The way that the pathologists often look at it, they say, if it were not for X, would this person still be alive today? If it weren't for the ketamine, he'd probably still be alive today, but at the same time, it probably wasn't the ketamine that killed him.
Most of the fatalities from ketamine are a result of combination with other drugs that are more fatal and or unmonitored engagement with the environments. If somebody is doing ketamine unmonitored and they're next to a body of water, that's a recipe for disaster.
A lot of people are blaming the so-called ketamine queen for Matthew Perry's death.
Her lawyer says that she had no connection with Matthew Perry and that a very different side of her will come out at a trial.
If she's convicted of all the charges against her, Jasveen Sangha will face between 10 years and life in prison. I mean, listen, you can arrest however many dealers you want, and it really is gonna be a drop in the bucket.
Just because we banned the substance doesn't mean that people are not gonna use it or seek it. Our job as a society is to figure out how do we keep people safe.
Matthew Perry's death was kind of a wake-up call for the ketamine industry.
When it's given legitimately, we see the miraculous life-saving ketamine. When it's done for monetary purposes, we see the dark side of ketamine.
I think what someone like Matthew Perry has done is shine a big light on that inflection point, recreational, potential harm, club versus legitimate medical purposes. That's sort of where we are.